Welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. The Delta variant has a grip on New Jersey. What does that mean for the fall? We'll talk with the CEO of University Hospital in Newark, Dr. Sharif El-Nahal. The eviction moratorium is expiring in New Jersey and across the country. Matt Shapiro, Executive Director of the Tenants Association, is here with what you need to know. Jersey Shore businesses are hard hit by the hiring crisis and making a desperate plea for workers to come back. And my commentary on why we should free Brittany. Hello, and welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. Glad you could join us. Let's get right to my interview with former health commissioner, now CEO of University Hospital in Newark, Sharif El-Nahal. Doctor, as always, thanks so much for your time. I know you've been looking at the numbers across New Jersey, the rise in cases because of the Delta variant, as well as numbers across the country. What are you looking at now? What do you believe is happening?
Well, what we're seeing, Larry, is unfortunately something that's not surprising and is a direct function of simply not enough people in our communities vaccinated yet. We are among the top states in the country for vaccination rates, which is something to celebrate and recognize. But remember, we're going to keep experiencing these peaks and troughs, these surges in cases, these increases in hospitalizations until we reach something called herd immunity, one way or the other. You can get there in two ways. One way is if you vaccinate, which is much lower risk to you and safe and effective, or you can wait until you get COVID-19, wait until enough people in the population get COVID-19, which comes at a significant cost to human health and human life. And so the Delta variant is not going to be the last variant that we see. We're seeing new variants form literally every week around the world. We should consider ourselves fortunate that the Delta variant is responsive to antibodies generated from the vaccines. In other words, the vaccines are effective in preventing severe infection and hospitalization and death from the Delta variant. But that may not be the case for the next variant.
Pfizer has come out and said that they would love to give a third shot, that they think it would be more effective if people got a third shot. I read that you weren't impressed with that.
Well, my comments before were around prematurely talking about a booster and what that could possibly do for vaccine confidence. And I don't think it helps vaccine confidence for folks who have not chosen to get the shot yet. However, just in the last couple of weeks, there are scientific reports and investigations that do seem to be pointing in the direction of a need for a booster. First of all, Israel released data showing that the effectiveness of the Pfizer vaccine, and they exclusively used Pfizer in Israel, does wane over time. It's waned after about the first 6 months of their vaccination campaign, and that's an important variable. And you are seeing more hospitalizations there, even among vaccinated people. While very rare, they are increasing. And secondly, there are other reports out of the United States, and of course the studies that Pfizer seems to be doing that do seem to be pointing us in this direction. So I don't want to speak ahead of the CDC or the FDA. That's another important point. We have to wait until the impartial scientific authorities and the public health authorities weigh in on this, but I do think that will be the direction we go in.
Some of the statistics that have come out about communities of color, African Americans, Hispanics from LA, there was a poll out today in Philadelphia that the lowest vaccinated population are Black Americans, with only 49% in Philadelphia, and many of them saying they will not get vaccinated. I know I've talked to you before about a outreach program to communities of color. It doesn't seem to be working, does it?
Well, I would argue that it's working in our community, Larry. So a couple things that are making me say that. The first is people are still getting vaccinated in Newark. So we've had targeted outreach, making sure we address the community humbly with the understanding that the history of medical racism, but also the experiences of so many people of color at the point of care around implicit bias, not taking their symptoms seriously, et cetera, that is all coloring folks' opinion on whether they should be vaccinated. But if you approach these conversations validating those concerns and recognizing them, you can dispel myths and misinformation pretty easily once you're a person of trust and you have that person in a trusted conversation. So we're proving that every day with canvassing that we're doing door to door for mobile vaccination events. This is just a few minutes of people's time. And we are getting them through the journey of wanting to get vaccinated. We've done over 1,000 shots with mobile vans across the state, including in our region right here in Irvington. And I do think that the data supports that people of color are more movable on this issue than other demographic groups, especially because their number one concern is around unknown side effects and adverse events. But the problem, Larry, of misinformation and disinformation seems to be the biggest barrier we're contending with now. Being a trusted person with credibility addressing those conversations really helps.
I told you before we started the interview that I talked to Dr. Brian Strom from Rutgers, who is the executive vice president in charge of health affairs. And he predicted 3 weeks ago that we were going to have a spike now. He said, watch, in 3 weeks, we're going to have a spike. And we interviewed him again. And he said that because of the July 4th gatherings. He said some of the stuff is extremely predictable. Does that mean, do you believe that the spike happens and now it'll subside, or because more people were infected, it will continue to rise?
Well, if you look at the slope, Larry, of what we're seeing in cases now throughout the country, that curve does not look like it's plateauing. So I don't think we are closer to the peak than we are to the beginning of the spike. I think the spike is going to continue for quite some time. And all the projections I've seen for New Jersey around what hospitalizations are likely to look like through October, November, only show an upslope at this point. And so I'm concerned that folks are thinking, well, it was because of one holiday or another, and we're not going to have another holiday for quite some time. I don't believe that's the case. I think people are continuing to spread this disease in our communities, primarily among the unvaccinated. So I will always end at this point with an appeal to get vaccinated, because that is our fastest and best way out of this.
Does it seem like we're not getting the right voices asking people to get vaccinated?
I do think that the Surgeon General's advisory on misinformation and what folks can do about it, but also other evidence and studies show that your best option here is interpersonal, in-person interactions with folks who are hesitant. And across the table, it has to be somebody who is trusted.
You've mandated your workers get vaccinated. How is that going?
It's going okay so far, Larry. So what's interesting is that in addition to doing these mobile vaccination events where we're having these conversations, I've had personal lunches with unvaccinated healthcare workers in my hospital to directly hear from them about what their concerns were. And it's funny, I just had one of those lunches last week. Within 7 days, almost everybody in that room ended up getting vaccinated, because I've done as much as I can do to earn their trust since the beginning of this pandemic and before, dispelled some of the myths that they had read on Facebook and social media, and they ended up being convinced and getting the shot. And so I do think we will have a scant few that end up not having an exemption and not taking it. The numbers will mature when they do on that. But we've made incredible progress now, approaching 90% even before the deadline of our employees vaccinated. So I'm very optimistic.
Thank you, sir, as always, for spending this time.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Sharif Elnahal, CEO of University Hospital in Newark. Still to come on Jersey Matters. How do you convince a loved one that he or she should get the COVID-19 vaccine? We ask one of the top psychiatrists in the country next. Former state senator Diane Allen is officially the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor. Republican gubernatorial candidate Jack Ciattarelli made the announcement at the Burlington Agricultural Center in Morristown. Allen wasted no time in attacking the current administration.
And that's how Governor Murphy's state of New Jersey is dealing with the people. And it's not just motor vehicle, unemployment. A lot of people weren't able to get their unemployment checks, and they weren't able to get through to somebody to say, help me. Of course, Governor Murphy says he wants to make New Jersey stronger and fairer. Well, then fix the darn system, for heaven's sakes. And if he wants it to be fairer, why is he raising taxes?
The 73-year-old former lawmaker from South Jersey is also a former TV news anchor from Philadelphia. Diane Allen will be joining us on the show next week. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. As you know, there are a whole lot of people that are flat out refusing to get vaccinated for COVID-19. But what if it's a loved one and you're really concerned that that person could get sick? Dr. Ted Brotkin, a nationally recognized doctor of psychiatry and a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, has some suggestions for you. Doctor, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. It has seemed like we've almost come to an impasse in this country where the administration, states, even in families, people are frustrated because those who have decided not to get vaccinated are almost unmovable on the issue. This is an area of expertise for you. Let's go step by step because it's probably different depending on who's doing the talking. How would you counsel a government that wants to get people vaccinated? How would you counsel them in changing their messaging?
I think that they should make the messaging clear, sticking with the evidence and the science, and really explaining what the benefits of being vaccinated are, and not changing around the message as much as they can. I mean, the message has to change a bit as the science evolves, but keeping it clear, keeping it simple.
Yeah, I've talked to people, so we can get away from government for a second. I've talked to people who are extremely concerned because their son or their daughter or someone they love just doesn't want to get vaccinated for a variety of reasons. I would imagine the conversation is much different in that kind of interpersonal persuasion.
Yes, it is. And, there's a number of people, there's a substantial percentage of people in the country who have chosen to not get vaccinated up until this time. I think there's some variability among them in their feelings about the vaccination and their stance. I think there are some who are probably really completely against it and are going to be hard to convince otherwise. I think there's another group that is what we call vaccine hesitant, that they have mixed feelings. In some ways, they could see the potential benefits of vaccination, but they have concerns, worries that are keeping them from getting vaccinated so far. So I think it's especially productive to be able to have conversations with those who are vaccine hesitant, because I think it could help them clarify what they want to do.
So what do you suggest? How should people in their own families, in their own circles, be talking to the vaccine hesitant?
Well, I think that an approach that often doesn't work well is to just tell them you need to go get vaccinated, or to just start giving information on all the benefits of vaccination and say, so go get vaccinated, or insist that they get vaccinated. Because when you're talking with someone who has mixed feelings and is ambivalent, when they hear that, when they hear a lecture coming at them, the side of them that has the worries and the concerns and the hesitation usually comes to the fore, and they may feel resistant to the lecture that you're giving them, and they may start to just tune out and not even listen to you anymore. So I think a different kind of approach can be really useful. And I can go into that if you'd like.
Yes, please. But what are the steps?
Yeah, so there's an approach that this comes from clinical medicine. It's called motivational interviewing. And this is something that doctors and clinicians do, but other people can use a similar approach with friends and family members. And basically what it involves, rather than lecturing or insisting, it starts with just developing a good dialogue and really asking the other person, so how are you feeling about this whole vaccination thing? Like, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? And really just listening in a genuine way to what their thoughts and feelings are. You can also ask them, like, what more information would you want to have about it? Or what concerns do you have about it? And then really listen to them genuinely. The other thing that you can do, because I've said that they may have mixed feelings about this, is you can ask them to share with you what they see, in addition to their concerns, what do they see as some of the potential upsides of getting vaccinated? And that's going to vary by person, and it's hard to predict. So for some people, it might be if I got vaccinated, and in some ways that might protect some of my loved ones that I'm around, or I might be in a better position to travel and take that trip I really wanted to take this summer, or whatever it is. And so by having that kind of conversation and exploring with them what they feel like the upsides might be, it might help them to consolidate their own motivation to get vaccinated. But what you're really helping them to do is to develop their own motivation, and you're not imposing on them too harshly, or you're not forcing them. And there's a lot of evidence out there to show that this approach can work better.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Doctor, for talking to us today. I think it was extremely worthwhile. I think people are going to learn something from it. And maybe you'll get some more people vaccinated. Dr. Ted Brotkin, professor at Penn University. Still to come on Jersey Matters.
I'm Phil Anderson. Coming up on Jersey Matters, Governor Murphy mandates vaccines for all state healthcare workers.
Governor Phil Murphy on Friday announces that all students K through 12 and staff in New Jersey public schools must wear masks in September for the start of the school year. Just 2 weeks ago, the governor announced that school kids would be mask-free in September, but a rise in COVID cases forced him to change his mind. And just last week, you'll remember, President Biden mandated that all federal workers show proof of vaccination. And as Jersey Matters' Phil Andrews tells us now, Governor Murphy followed suit in New Jersey. Phil.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Delta variant of COVID-19 is dominant here in the Garden State, and as you would expect, that causes hospitalization and COVID-19 cases to rise rapidly.
So, with that in mind, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy took steps earlier this week to start mandating vaccinations for healthcare workers in New Jersey's private and public healthcare facilities.
This mandate will apply to all staff entering a healthcare facility or congregate living setting. This includes the Ancora, Greystone Park, and Trenton Psychiatric Hospitals, the Ann Klein Forensic Center, the Veterans Homes in Paramus, Menlo Park, and Vineland, all state developmental centers, state correctional and juvenile justice facilities and county-run correctional facilities, long-term care and assisted living facilities, acute care and specialty hospitals, short-term and post-acute inpatient rehabilitation facilities, and licensed behavioral health facilities.
Of course, the caveat here is that if workers chose not to get vaccinated, they would still have the option to get tested once or twice every week for COVID-19. But is that option really viable? Here's what Sue Collins of the New Jersey Coalition for Vaccination Choices had to say.
I think that if we are going to do testing, we should also be testing those who are vaccinated, because as we all know now with this new variant, we're finding that breakout cases, if you want to call it that, or cases among the vaccinated are also increasing. So I think you need to, kind of be testing everybody, or testing when it makes sense. Obviously, if someone has symptoms that aren't feeling well, yes, test. I think people also need to be diligent in, if they're not feeling well, they stay home.
Now, Governor Murphy also suggested that privately owned businesses in the Garden State also consider vaccine mandates for their employees, much like some of these major companies across the globe who have implemented vaccine rules for employees returning to the office. However, is this process actually legal?
I believe as a matter of law, employers, both in the private sector and in the public sector, can mandate employees get vaccinated. I think it is absolutely within their managerial rights. And it was actually tested many years ago in 1905 in a case involving Massachusetts, where the U.S. Supreme Court held that that the state of Massachusetts, was able to compel its citizenry to get vaccinated for smallpox for health, safety, welfare reasons. They held it was part of the police power of a governmental entity.
By the way, the governor's office will still have to negotiate with several of the state's unions in order to find a resolution that makes sense for both the state and union members.
Now, Governor Murphy's goal is to vaccinate about 80 to 85% of Garden State residents. That would be about 7.9 million. At the moment, only 64% of the state has been fully vaccinated. For Jersey Matters, I'm Phil Andrews.
Thank you, Phil. Next on Jersey Matters.
Signing bonuses, 401ks, and other perks, you name it, are being handed out by businesses in New Jersey. Is that enough to compete with unemployment? Find out next, coming up on Jersey Matters.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. We are now more than halfway through our post-pandemic summer, and businesses, especially businesses at the Jersey Shore, are struggling still to get people to come back to work. Jersey Matters' Kimberly Kravitz talked to some Jersey Shore business owners. Kimberly.
While New Jersey's economic recovery continues, the state, alongside the nation, combats a huge labor shortage. And we see business owners operating on overwhelming demand on skeleton crews. So why is it still so tough to get people back to work?
We're offering 401k plans, paid benefits. We pay overtime. We give a week's paid sick time, a week's paid vacation time. I mean, we're doing everything we can do to entice people to come back to work.
Business owners like Amy Weiss are frustrated with more children having to return to daycare and not enough staff to cover the classrooms.
We were well staffed in the beginning. Then there were all sorts of incentives through unemployment, so people stopped working. They wanted to work part-time to be able to collect unemployment.
Unemployment benefits are keeping the pocketbooks of New Jersey residents full, giving them no incentive to return to work.
Whether it was 600 extra or 300 extra, whether it was somebody that worked in a restaurant or, they were in, they made sales or things like that, they were making more money during the pandemic than ever before. What's the incentive to go back to work?
New Jersey has paid out $31.4 billion in unemployment benefits, and in June, the state gained more than 16,000 jobs, according to the latest data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And yet, the unemployment rate is at 7.3%.
We have the highest unemployment rate in the nation.
However, small businesses in New Jersey are eligible for another round of grant money to help recover from the pandemic. NJBIA's Michelle Sakurka says it may keep businesses afloat, but may still be tough to grow.
We know that over 70% of New Jersey businesses said that it's going to take them a year or more to get back to equilibrium, meaning that their revenue is going to equal their expense. They're all working right now, really hanging on by a shoestring. Some of those won't ever come back.
The restaurant industry is feeling the effects of the labor shortage too, with minimal staff and plenty of patrons.
Luckily, people have been very generous, and that's really nice to know that there's still people out there that are coming out here and appreciating what we're doing. And we try to show that in return tenfold.
People are on vacation. They want to be on the beach and not waiting online for sandwiches and not waiting online and having 2-hour waits in restaurants and then waiting 45 minutes at their table to get their dinner. It's hard.
I just want to remind them that everybody is working way too many hours. I mean, I have people working 60 hours a week for me. And, just please appreciate that they're really running around. And for every table like you, there's another 25 tables that are asking them for something. So please be respectful and additionally be appreciative.
And in the coming weeks, business owners tell me that they fear the problem will only intensify as their seasonal workers return back to school. Reporting for Jersey Matters, I'm Kimberly Kravitz.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. During the pandemic, a whole lot of people couldn't pay their rent. And that could have been a disaster for both tenants and landlords if both the federal and state governments didn't step in with eviction moratoriums. But those moratoriums are ending now. What happens now? We spoke with Matt Shapiro, Executive Director of the New Jersey Tenants Association, who says, "Be glad you live in New Jersey." Sir, thanks so much for spending this time with us, and I'm hoping you can sort some of this out. It seems like when it comes to evictions, not only in New Jersey, but across the country, there are a lot of moving parts right now. Court cases, legislation, moratoriums that are expiring. It might be difficult for people who are trying to find information about their situation, exactly what's happening. So can you try to break that down and explain it?
I'll try. It's the situation in New Jersey is different from the rest of the country. I know you probably focused on the fact that the federal moratorium is ending on Saturday, but we have had a better moratorium in New Jersey for the entire time. But it's only a moratorium, and it also is going to be coming to a close. Right now, the ending date is December 31st, or if the governor chooses an earlier date.
Well, let me stop you there, because you just threw that out there. If he chooses an earlier date, is that a possibility?
It's very likely going to happen, yes. And that's because a bill that we have been working on for over a year, it's something that has involved negotiation between tenants and landlords. So this is a compromise bill, and it's extremely unusual. I think it's unique, actually, in the country. What it does is it takes all of the money that's owed for back rent, and there's a lot of it. It's probably close to $2 billion that is currently owed by tenants, and it converts it to civil debt. Now, what that means is that it will no longer be, for most tenants, for anybody who's below 120% of the median income, middle income and down. For those tenants, it will no longer be subject to eviction. That is, non-payment of the rental arrearage will no longer cause an eviction. The landlord will still be able to sue the tenant for the money, but not to evict them onto the street.
And there's two sides to this. We keep talking about the tenants. There are two sides, and nobody seems like they're right or wrong. Both sides, the tenants and the landlords, are victims of the pandemic, and both have suffered to some extent through this. And
Sure.
You're saying, you're talking about, I know there was a federal court case. I know there was the moratorium that you talked about that's ending on the weekend, on Saturday. There's the state moratorium. There's legislation that is being pushed now in Congress. There's legislation in New Jersey. And I guess what I'm getting at is that it causes a lot of discontent, and it causes a lot of confusion for some people who need some stability in their lives, especially if you own properties. But I don't see in what you're saying that exists anywhere. If they're trying to find some consistent, it just doesn't exist right now.
Well, it does in this legislation. As I said, this legislation was negotiated between the tenants and the landlords. This bill helps both sides. The second part of this also helps both sides, and that is when I said what's going to happen the next month when the tenant can't pay. In addition, there is a $500 million program that's going to be started called the Eviction Prevention Program, which will provide rent subsidies for these same tenants to a certain degree to help them pay current and future rent.
Your bottom line is for both renters and landlords, they are taken care of, at least for now.
We're hoping that's the case. Once this bill is signed, and we think it will be in a week, it should be the case. We are concerned about last minute amendments that went into the bill that are problematic, and we hope to be able to work them out with the administration through proper implementation, let's say.
I think you've put a lot of people's minds at rest, because I know what I went through trying to understand this and reading about it. And I'm certain that there are people across the state that were extremely worried. And I think put a lot of people at ease by saying they're not going to get thrown out of their homes this weekend.
Correct. That's not going to happen.
Matt Shapiro, director of the New Jersey Tenants Association. Still to come on Jersey Matters, a New Jersey legend is honored for her years of service assuring free and fair elections. That's next. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. Laura Wooten from Mercer County is a legend. For 71 straight years, she worked the polls on Election Day, dating all the way back to 1939, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president. Governor Phil Murphy recently honored Laura by signing Laura Wooten's bill into law, a bill that requires civics be taught in every New Jersey classroom. Laura Wooten died 2 years ago, but her daughter, Yvonne Hill, is proud to tell us about her legacy. What was your reaction when you heard that the civics bill was going to be named after your mom?
I was extremely excited. I mean, I thought it was going to be such a fantastic honor. And I don't know how else to describe it other than I was just elated.
I understand. It is an incredible tribute, and appropriate considering what your mom has done. Tell people a little bit about your what your mom did and why a bill that requires civics be taught be named after her.
Okay, well, my mom was born in 1920. She actually graduated from Princeton High School in 1939. And during that time, she was recruited to work the polls by her great uncle Anderson Mittenall, who was actually running as Justice of the Peace for the Princeton-Mercer area. So my mom started working the polls in 1939, and she continued working the polls for 79 consecutive years. She never missed a year.
Wow. And why? Did she ever talk to you about it? Why she thought that was important?
Well, I know exactly what year it was. It was 2008. A friend and I were having a discussion about voter apathy and young people voting, et cetera, et cetera. And I happened to casually mention, oh, my mom's been working the polls for about 40 years. And he was so impressed. He says, oh, my goodness, really? Why does she do that? So that evening when I called my mom and I told her I'd had a discussion about her, and I said, yeah, and I told my friend you worked the polls for 40 years. And she said to me, where'd you get that number? I'm like, well, I don't know. When we were little kids, I remember you getting up in the middle of the night, and when you came back, it was night again. And later on, I learned you were going to the polls. So I thought 40 sounded like a long time. And she says, well, let me tell you the story. She says, I was working the polls before you kids, as she called us, were even born. And at the time, my oldest sister was about 70 years old. And I said, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me. You've been working the polls for that long? So instantly I knew it had to be some kind of record, either local, nationally, or whatever. But I said to her, well, he wanted to know, why do you do this? And she said, because voting is important. And that was her answer.
No, and God bless her. I mean, we're going through so much consternation in this country about voting laws and about voting and when polls should be open and if people should be mailed ballots. It sounds like no matter what the rules were, your mom voted, knew where to vote, and served this country and the state very well. What would she think about all of this?
Oh my gosh, I know she would be super honored and excited, but at the same time, one of her standard responses, and I will use that now, would be, I don't understand what the fuss is about. I was just doing my civic duty. But she would just be so super excited, because one of the things she always said to me was that young people need to get more involved in the process. And young people need to start working the polls, because over the years, as you can well imagine, 79 years, she saw a lot of people, that worked the polls with her get sick, get ill, couldn't come to the polls anymore, or pass away. So she watched that. And so that was a big thing with her about young people getting involved.
Well, I can't imagine how proud you must be and how proud you were of your mother all throughout her lifetime, especially when you found out how long she had been working the polls. And now all of New Jersey knows about her and will be proud of her. And so congratulations on that. And thank you so much for talking.
And thank you very much.
Yvonne Hill, daughter of New Jersey legend Laura Wooten. Next on Jersey Matters.
Pet adoptions increased quite a bit during the pandemic. Now a new trend is emerging: animal surrenders. I'm Sherry Carabin, and coming up on Jersey Matters, I'll have that story.
I really think overall we have lucked out big time. We've had cooler than average weather, we've had less humid weather. It's all going to change though as the hot pattern returns over the weekend. Obviously, you just go outside and you notice that big difference in the mid and upper 80s over the weekend, but then a long string of 90-degree temperatures are coming our way pretty much all week long, right into Friday and Saturday of next week. We're watching the tropics closely. It's been very quiet over the past couple weeks, but that activity is going to start to really pick up as we go into the heart of hurricane season. No immediate threat to the mainland United States, but we got to watch it, because I think over the next couple weeks there certainly could be a reversal of that, and we might be looking at some impact for us. Partly to mostly sunny skies pretty much for the next few days, just minor shower and thunderstorm chances, nothing big coming our way. No tropical systems, no severe weather. I think you're going to be happy about that. Here's your 7-day outlook, and you'll see that we are going to get really hot by the end of next week. I'm Nor'easter Nick for Jersey Matters.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. During the pandemic, we shared with you some heartwarming stories about people who went out to adopt pets for companionship. But unfortunately, some of those stories don't have a happy ending. As Jersey Matters' Sherry Carabin now tells us, many of those pets are again looking for a home. Sherry.
Larry, the isolation some people felt during the height of the pandemic, combined with all the additional free time, led to more pet adoptions. Now, as residents head back to the office or face economic hardship, a lot of those same animals are being surrendered, or worse yet, abandoned. Meet Jupiter and Rudy, two bully breeds who've traded shelter life for hugs, toys, and treats after being saved from uncertain fates by the nonprofit Jersey-based Brick City Rescue. Founded in 2017, Brick City Rescue partners with local shelters, rescue organizations, and animal hospitals like All Creatures, Great and Small in Fairfield to provide medical care and find forever homes for dogs.
We mainly focus on the bully breed or larger breed dogs, Rottweilers, German Shepherd mixes, Lab mixes, things of that nature. We rescue from the street, from the shelters, owner surrenders, things of that nature. Anywhere we can possibly get them that they need our assistance, we will take them.
While it's always been busy, lately its resources are being stretched to the limit as owner surrenders are at a record high. A large portion of those requesting assistance are New Jerseyans who adopted pets during the pandemic.
Our email is inundated. My phone rings several times a day, if not with just strays on the street that people have let go. We get anywhere from 1 to 3, I would say, a day emails of owners surrendering their pets.
People say within an hour I need to get rid of the dog, abandoning them. It's very upsetting.
It's not only dog rescue organizations that are being overwhelmed. Vanessa Steiger, president of the nonprofit Chance at Life Cat Rescue, says stray, feral, and kitten populations have exploded in Jersey neighborhoods. Steiger, who was not available to speak on camera, says the problem is largely due to the shutdown of many trap, neuter, and return programs during the height of the pandemic, and the decision by some private veterinarians to close or reduce their their hours. She says the organization, which primarily focuses on Bergen County, is now working overtime to try and find suitable permanent homes for some of the cats you see here. Anyone interested can visit their website, but be ready for a thorough and extensive screening process aimed at heading off what can be a less than happy outcome for some unwanted felines.
I believe if someone has a cat that they can no longer care for, they 100% most likely just let them live outside. Unless it's an owner that's in a dire situation that truly loves their cat and cannot keep them, they will call, but for the most part, I feel cats are just, they're not surrendered as much as dogs are.
So why are so many pandemic adoption stories ending with the animal again in need of a new forever home?
A lot of people were obviously either unemployed or working from home and decided that they wanted to help homeless animals. So people started either fostering or adopting. Mainly adopting. I think it was more of a spontaneous act on their part, all with good intentions. However, now that businesses are opening back up and people are going back to work, they feel that they don't have time for their pets again. Or they have become unemployed, have gone through financial hardship, and now they feel that they can't afford to keep these pets.
There are also pets that lost owners due to COVID-19 and now have no one to care for them. While every situation is unique, animal rescue advocates say there are resources out there for those trying to hold on to their animals.
There are rescues out there that will help financially if we can raise the money. There's dog walkers out there. There's daycares out there. If you can't afford it, maybe we can help you and assist you financially. We can try to raise money, but there are other outlets. If you do work full time, you can have a dog walker go there once a day to let the animals out just so they can get out.
While Brick City Rescue places dogs across New Jersey and in neighboring states, some lucky animals don't have to look any further than another volunteer.
I've actually adopted 2 of our rescues. I have a red nose at home. His name is Dutch. We adopted him a year and a half ago. He's been with me for 3 years. He was a Brick City Rescue dog. And Rudy, I just adopted him in December.
If you're interested in adopting or fostering a dog, you can visit brickcityrescue.com. Reporting from Fairfield, I'm Sherry Carabin for Jersey Matters.
All right, thank you, Sherry. My commentary on Britney Spears is next. There is much to be learned from Britney Spears' frustrating fight to free herself from the conservatorship that has dictated every aspect of her life for over a decade. If you've been off the grid for the last 20 years or so and don't know about the Britney Spears saga, let me give you a quick tutorial. From 1999 to 2011, Britney Spears was a pop music phenom. 6 albums she released during that time went to #1. She sold over 100 million records worldwide. But fame can be taxing on a young girl who was born and raised in Macomb, Mississippi, and was thrown into the flames of international stardom as a teenager. The paparazzi hounded her relentlessly as she tried to live her life as a young wife and mother, and contributed to her marriage failing and losing custody of her children. Until finally, she snapped. These pictures of Spears attacking the car of a paparazzi who followed her to her ex-husband's house where she pleaded to see her children were sold all around the world and elicited shock and ridicule. Ridicule she didn't need. It was a cry for help. Much like American gymnast Simone Biles, who bowed out of the Olympics at the last minute, the weight of the pressure of international celebrity on a young woman is sometimes too much to take. We all need to take a pause in these instances and realize a young woman's mental health is much more important than a society's perceived entitlement to their talents. In January of 2008, Britney Spears' father, Jamie Spears, who admits he has a strained relationship with his daughter and has had one for some time, was awarded a conservatorship over her affairs. It was a quick trial, some say 10 minutes. There was no testimony, not even from Britney Spears. A conservatorship is when the court awards an interested party, normally a spouse or a parent, but sometimes an attorney, either partial control or complete control over another person's life. In the case of Britney Spears, her father was awarded control over every aspect of her life. That usually only happens when a person has serious mental illness or a drug addiction, Alzheimer's, dementia, or is in a coma. 1.3 million people are under conservatorships in this country. $50 billion of their assets are controlled by someone else. It is the money involved that is usually the source of abuse.
Good morning, Miss Peterson. I'm sorry to disturb you so early. The court has ruled that you require assistance in taking care of yourself. I'm fine. I'm afraid it's not up to you to decide. The court has appointed me to be your legal guardian.
That's a clip from the Netflix movie I Care a Lot, about a company that made tens of millions on conservatorship abuse. The movie was fictional, exaggerated, but often the abuse and sometimes the separation of a person from their family is very real. And Britney Spears is not the first celebrity to be a conservatorship victim. In the 30s and 40s, Hollywood icon, the late Mickey Rooney, was one of the biggest stars in the world. As he grew old and got into his 70s, his son-in-law from his 8th marriage took control of his life with a conservatorship. Like Britney Spears, Rooney had to file suit, listing abuses that included depriving the actor of food and medicine.
I was eventually and completely stripped of the ability to make even the most basic decisions.
That was Mickey Rooney at a 2011 congressional hearing on elder abuse. 3 years later, he died. Did he seem incapacitated or unable to make decisions for himself to you? No. Britney Spears is now 39 years old and back in court to end the conservatorship controlled by her father. And now, Britney Spears' doctors and mother are siding with the pop star, with Britney Spears' mother, Lynn, saying in court documents that Jamie Spears is incapable of putting her daughter's interest above his own. Now that the courts have allowed Britney Spears to have her own attorney, and it's incredible it took this long for that to happen, and with the worldwide support for Britney Spears, it's difficult to imagine this conservatorship will continue. But I do hope this doesn't end the public's interest in conservatorships, because it's not just Britney Spears. States across the country need to take a closer look at their conservatorship laws and make certain they are in the best interest of the person being cared for and not the conservator, and certainly not the attorneys who rake in oodles of billable hours, all paid for out of the estate funds. Conservatorships can be a gold mine for everyone except the person who earned the money. And with that in mind, free Britney. I'm Larry Menti. We'll talk again soon.